In today's Season 3 finale, mechanical issues yet again. The wind is very windy.
Man, that wind is crazy.
And I say don't you dare.
Don't you dare, don't you dare.
Hello and welcome back to a very special episode of Screen Tested. I am your host Tyrant, where we take things from movies, TV shows, pop culture, try to create them in the real world and test them one-to-one from the media that they come from. Now we are on to the Season 3 finale. Yes, that is what we're doing in today's episode. 3 seasons already. Wow, that has gone by quick. But before we get into it, I just wanted to genuinely say thank you to every single one of you who has subscribed, liked, commented, supported the channel since its launch this year. It's been incredible. It's been going better than I ever thought it would. And I wanted to say thank you for that, guys. 3 seasons already. And season 4 is probably going to be something even bigger and better. But let's get into it with today's episode. We're going to be taking a look at something from Elden Ring, Ghiza's Wheel, and also Bloodborne, the Whirlgig. I never know how to say it. Anyway, yes, this is a double whammy, a From Software special, if you will. We're going to be taking a look at both of these weapons and trying to kind of mishmash and put them together and create what should be a similar concept to both, but a little bit different, a little bit of our own unique thing, and put it to the test. This one is going to be dangerous. It's going to be so dangerous, it's not even funny. But it's a Season 3 finale, so let's get started. I am genuinely excited for this one. Ghiza's Wheel, or the Whirlgig, however you want to say it, is a magic-powered weapon, meaning it uses magic in the games, for the most part, to power them. Now, this is the real world, and we need a way for this wheel to spin, so what I'm going to be doing is hand-powering them. I want them to be powered by my hands in terms of, turning something. The reason for this is purely just down to safety, if I'm being honest. Now, you know me, if I'm talking about safety, then this is dangerous. So I don't want to be using anything that has electricity or an angle grinder or a drill or something like that. I want this purely to be hand powered because I don't think I can reach such crazy RPMs as something like an angle grinder, right? And it's one of those things where it poses so much danger already. I just don't think we need to go that little extra bit that turns into the dumb territory. I mean, this is already stupid. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that so you guys understand why we're doing that. So let's get started. Okay, getting to the Ghiza's Wheel, or the Whirlgig Wheel, however we want to say it. The build for this is expensive. Oh my word. This cost me so much in raw materials, and that's even with recycling older projects. I've never really said it on camera, but I do recycle older projects, especially raw materials, so then I can use them again, because why wouldn't I? So, getting started with the build process for Ghiza's Wheel, first off, I needed to order these aluminum rims. These cost like 60 bucks, they're kind of expensive. I also needed so many blades to go all the way around the wheel, and then I got a crutch. I know that's a bit of an odd, thing to throw in there. Anyway, yes, I got a crutch because I thought that would actually be a pretty good mount. I was originally going to use something like a bike fork or whatever they're called, but I didn't think that it would be big enough and I couldn't get one in time. So I used the crutch to be the main crutch of the build, I guess is the best way to describe that. So what I did was I cut a whole bunch of little slits into the wheel itself to be able to hold onto all of the blades. Now the mounting for the blades is going to be pretty straightforward. I'm going to use a pin on the underside so that they cannot come out unless they literally snap in half, and then I'll use some things like epoxy and some different glues to keep the blades from falling back the other way. This should be enough for testing purposes, especially for this sort of prototype design. Then after that, I'm going to modify the crutch a little bit so that it can actually fit the wheel, and hopefully then it can start to spin. Now what I'm going to use for the actual propulsion of the wheel is a bike gear chain. I think they're called sprockets, something like that. That is what I'm going to try and use to actually hand power the wheel. Then I'm going to start assembling the entire project, give it some weathering so it looks like it comes from its respective universes, that being Elden Ring and Bloodborne, of course. But that is pretty much all of today's build, and this one was an expensive one. But with that out of the way, let's get to the B-roll and then to the testing. I did something stupid. Again. Here is Ghiza's wheel, or the Whirlgig, however you want to say it. It is ready to be tested, and this thing has turned out dangerous. This is dangerous. However, let us see how dangerous it is truly. Now, in today's episode, we're going to go through all the standard mediums, things like water bottles, some flesh analogs. We've got Tony. We've got a whole bunch of different stuff. We might even try some movesets just to see how this thing actually performs. This thing is terrifying. No, I will not cut a bottle just yet. We will get to the testing. All right, but before we do, I just want to mention a couple of things. First off, this is heavy, and I feel like I made this quite light with the aluminum frame and the aluminum wheel. It's still a heavy How I decided to troubleshoot the problems, because in the games you use it a bit more like this, right? Like that, and then you swing it, and then you roll it up and then hit. The problem with all of those different methods is I need some way to actually power it. And the way that I decided to power it was with a chain. Now, this is not the best way to fix this solution, but it is the most safe. Relatively speaking, this is still absolutely dangerous. But hand powering it was kind of the best of a bad lot, let's put it that way. Now, what do I think is going to happen? The first thing that I think is going to happen is I think this is going to have a bit of a gyroscopic effect. Because we have a spinning wheel, I think it's actually going to be quite hard to maneuver around once it gets going. We'll see if those results are borne out in the testing. With all my little ramblings out of the way, let's get to it. Well, the blades are sharp. Sun's out, it's not as windy for the moment. Let's see if we're able to actually get some results here. All right, so we'll start with some water bottles. Water bottles are fun, I enjoy them. Let's build up our speed. I also think that I'm developing a bit of a technique here on how I like to use it. So I get it spinning, then I let the momentum do the rest of the work for me. Now I got to reset my chain. Now obviously this is a bit more of a fault with my design than the weapon itself, but we are dealing with a weapon that, doesn't exist. So let's keep that in mind. Even if you were to create one of these in the real world, it would still be pretty similar. And what I mean by that is it would still use probably like a drive chain to actually spin the wheel. That left a bigger mark. I just dug straight through that PVC with those blades. This went straight through, like 2mm thick PVC, no problem. Let's do another. I want to get a nice clean cut with the blades. If you're enjoying today's episode, you should consider subscribing. Tony would enjoy it. Wouldn't you, Tony? Wouldn't ya? All right, I'm gonna put the mask on for this one, just because these blades might, might break. Don't you dare, don't you dare. Preliminary thoughts before we get into the last couple of things. Mechanical issues, man. Now, obviously that can be chalked up to my craftsmanship, sure, but one of the things is mechanical weapons just are prone to fail more than static type weapons. Now, obviously that's not a surprise to anybody, obviously, but it is something to consider. Now, in terms of how this thing is performing, it's performing pretty well. I mean, it is slicing through things with ease. It's just the mechanical aspects that are pissing me off. Up to speed. Mechanical issues yet again. Because those blades, right, are so thin and sharp, when you are looking at them direct on, I'll show you guys in a second actually, I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about, they become pretty much invisible, and it's super f***ing dangerous. Like if I point the blades to you like that, they disappear. All right, let's get up to speed. Nice, just like that. Let's f***ing go. Whichever arm is your dominant arm, for example, the way I'm using this is bracing it on my left, then I can use all my power and torque, I guess, to spin the blade up to speed with my right hand. Now I am right-handed. The problem with that is all that strain goes directly onto my left arm. Then when I use it as a club, right, and I'm just swinging it around like it's a giant club, same sort of concept. A lot of the weight goes onto your dominant arm, whichever one the dominant one is. So as you saw, at first I was using my right hand, then that got tired. So I switched over to my left, and then that got tired as well. This is just a very front heavy weapon no matter what. And keep in mind, this is still, I would say, relatively small compared to the original design. The original designs are huge, right? So this is heavy, made out of aluminum. Imagine the weight of like a super accurate game version. It'd be unwieldable. It'd literally be unwieldable. We've done water bottles, we've done some carrots, we've done some melons, we've done all the soft mediums. Now, the blades are starting to falter a little bit. Now, this is kind of, like how to describe this? This is expected and kind of what I don't want to say want, but I need to recycle this, I need to take this apart. So having the blades kind of come a little bit loose right now isn't the worst thing in the world. They are pinned, so they're not going to fly out unless they literally snap in half, which means it's going to make it easier for me to take it apart. But while I'm still in testing, I don't want it to fall apart. So we've got one last thing to test, and that is Tony. Let's see how this goes against Tony's armor, against his supple silicon flesh. And then maybe like I'll swing it around a little bit if I still got some energy, because as you can see, whew, it's a heavy boy. All right, let's get to it. If it still spins, it still wins. Okay, that one needed a little bit more time in the oven. Whatever. Let's keep going. It's time to rate this thing and see how it performed on the tits scale. Now, I like this. Like, this thing is cool, right? This thing is awesome. This is pure fantasy. Obviously, there's issues translating things from like a game or a movie into the real world because it has so many mechanical faults. Now, you're probably thinking right off the bat, well, the one in the game runs off magic, so there isn't any mechanical faults. But keep in mind, even the one in the game would have something like a pivot and a wheel that spins around. Now, I did give mine a couple of, I would say, upgrades in comparison to the original designs, and that is the blade shape specifically. These ones are straight blades, meaning there's a much less chance that they're going to get caught on things. However, even with the pool noodles, we did see that it can get caught on things. The ones in the games were a lot more times than not like hooks, which hook into things, which would get stuck, which is a problem. But let's get into the scale. Let's get into the scale. So starting off in the first category of wieldability. This is where I think some people might agree, might disagree the most. And that is, it's a heavy weapon no matter what. If I have this design or I have a design straight from the game, it's just heavy. It's a heavy weapon. And I don't know if it justifies that weight on the effectiveness. Obviously, we'll get to the effectiveness a little bit later, but keep in mind, I didn't think it was that much more effective than a regular weapon. However, there is a huge intimidation factor. That's true. But in terms of the wieldability specifically, I didn't find anything too egregious. It was just the issue of, first off, it did have that gyroscopic effect. Because the blade is spinning around so fast, when you try and move it, it wants to counteract that because of that gyroscopic effect. That is kind of just an issue with the design in itself, so we'll get to that a little bit later. But in terms of the wieldability, I was able to move it, I was able to swing it around. It was For the most part, comfortable. The issue I had was just it seemed to fatigue one arm, whichever was the dominant arm, you know, controlling it, if we want to put it that way. That was the arm that was getting fatigued. So in terms of wieldability or usability, I'm somewhere around like a 5 or 6. It's not terrible, but I definitely feel like there's some kinks to be worked out with that. Next up, let's get to the design. I was talking a lot about the design. This is where it's going to diverge from the game versus what I've created, right? This monstrosity. Because the game runs on magic, but it's also way bigger, way heavier, so you wouldn't actually be able to use it probably at all. This one you are able to use. There's back and forth here with the design. But in terms of having some sort of wheeled device with blades on it that you swing around, I mean, like I'm somewhere in like the 6. That's as high as I can go for the design. There are benefits to it, but I would never pick this. I feel like that's the best analogy I always come up with these sorts of things. I think it's a formidable weapon and it's really crazy, really cool, and it's kind of scary to not only the user, but to whoever you're attacking. But the issue is, I wouldn't pick it. There wouldn't be a scenario where I'd be like, yeah, this is what I want. Next up, we have comfort. Now, the comfort of this thing wasn't the worst. When I was hitting things, I didn't feel particularly bad. The comfort and the usability kind of go hand in hand, specifically with this one more than others, perhaps because there is that issue that it's quite heavy and it can be fatiguing. That is a comfort issue at the end of the day, but it's also a usability issue. So again, for this, I'm probably in around a 5. That's as high as I can go for the comfort. It's not terrible, but it's not bad. It's kind of right in the line. Now, lastly is effectiveness. Now, this is the one where maybe there'll be spirited debate below. I don't know. It was pretty fucking gnarly. It did some damage. These blades were razor sharp, and the only issues we had with the blades were just like the build quality of the blades themselves. But it still performed. It still destroyed things. And they got pretty deep. Like, it was so sharp and so devastating to some things, you couldn't even see them on camera because they were just so quick. It was like razor blades. I mean, this is an interesting one because I'm not sure where this would go for effectiveness. It would f you up, but it also has a lot of issues and drawbacks with the design in and itself. The effectiveness then is detrimented by those other issues. All right, for effectiveness, the highest I could probably go is a 7. It's kind of dangerous to anybody and everybody around it, including the user. It can be effective, but at the same time, I don't know, man. This is one of those ones where just because you could do it, doesn't necessarily mean you should do it. But that gives us a final score of 23 out of 40 on the scale. Now, that isn't terrible. That's over the halfway point. I don't think that's unreasonable for something like this. This is more of a fantasy weapon. It's a really cool fantasy weapon, something that I really, really like, and I think is awesome. It's awesome to look at, and hopefully it looked good on camera. But at the same time, when you translate some of these things into the real world, it doesn't mean they're always going to be amazing, the coolest thing ever. And especially since this one it ran on magic in the games, translating that into a spinning wheel becomes a bit of a headache, no matter how you do it. Even if I had something that was, electrically powered, let's say, or diesel powered, it's still an issue because it is mechanical failure points. Just before we finish out with today's episode, guys, I wanted to let you know that there is channel memberships now activated. These builds are very expensive. This one cost over 200 bucks. If you want to support the channel, which I would really appreciate, you can down below. There'll be a link pinned in the comments, and next to the subscribe button there should be a join button. There's a whole bunch of tiers. You get behind the scenes content. There's even some exclusive content from my second channel. There's a whole bunch of stuff that hopefully you guys would consider today supporting the channel. I would really appreciate it, and it's what's going to make the channel sustainable. At the moment, I don't make any money from these builds or these videos. It's kind of just a black hole of money. But if you become a supporter, hopefully we can become sustainable at some point. So that is all for today's episode. Thank you for watching, guys. Thank you for subscribing and sharing, liking, commenting, all of it. 3 seasons. It's been absolutely awesome so far, and I appreciate every single one of you who takes the time to watch these types of projects and these episodes. Hopefully they're enjoyable. Hopefully you like them. But with that out of the way, thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you in another episode. Have a good one.